Tonight, the good with the bad. Strong jobs numbers in the face of record high inflation.
This as Congress works to pass a bill to combat inflation.
Inflation Reduction Act meets the needs of working families now.
Critics say that could make things even worse. Plus,
China's show of military force off the coast of Taiwan, increasing tensions with the U.S. And
staying here is an example of how Ukraine has become one family.
Orphans promise ministers to the victims of the war in Ukraine. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. New jobs numbers as inflation sticks and tensions simmer between the U.S. and China over Taiwan. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Matt Gelka.
And I'm Tara Mergener. Tonight, good news on the job front, even in the face of historic inflation not seen in 40 years. Today's numbers show 528,000 jobs added in July, the unemployment rate dropping to 3.5%. The economic news comes as Democrats are planning to vote this Saturday on a bill they call the Inflation Reduction Act. This comes after Senator Kirsten agreed to offer support. The bill would invest in energy and climate programs and will only need 50 votes to move forward. Democrats say the bill aims to reduce prescription drugs and health premiums, invest in fighting climate change, impose a new minimum tax on big corporations, and reduce the deficit by $300 billion. Republicans disagree and point to a study which says the bill will have no impact on inflation. Critics say raising taxes going into a recession is not a good economic plan.
To the primaries now. The Arizona governor's race officially has a matchup for November after former news anchor turned staunch Trump supporter Kari Lake took home the GOP nomination. Lake beat rival Karen Taylor Robson after a tough primary. Votes still being counted on Thursday sealed the deal for Lake. Trump backed the former news anchor early on, while Robson had a number of so-called establishment endorsements from former Vice President Mike Pence and Arizona Governor Doug Ducey. Lake now faces off with Democrat Katie Hobbs, the current Secretary of State of Arizona, in November.
Coming off the primary wins of candidates like Lake, former President Trump heads to Wisconsin tonight, rallying in support of Tim Michels, a Republican candidate for governor. Trump then heads to Texas, where he'll headline the annual Conservative Political Action Conference, which kicked off Thursday. Senator Ted Cruz speaking to attendees today, saying America is in crisis, but revival is coming.
Across American history, politics has always had a natural pendulum sense to it. One party gets in power, they go too far one direction, and the American people pull it back. We are going to see in November not just a red wave, but a tsunami sweeping this country.
Other speakers for the event this week included Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, and former presidential candidate and Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. All right, here with us now is our very own CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, thanks for joining us on Faith Nation. The former president set to speak tonight at a rally in Wisconsin and tomorrow night at CPAC, coming off a major primary win with Trump-backed Kari Lake's victory in Arizona. Is there any doubt at this point of Trump's status as the Republican kingmaker?
No doubt. Back to you, Tara. No, just kidding. I have a little bit more now for you. No, there's no doubt at all. Arizona obviously is ground zero for all of this. It wasn't just Kari Lake, but Mark Fincham, who a lot of people say, Mark who exactly? Did you say Mark Hamill from Star Wars? No. Mark Fincham, the Secretary of State nominee on the Republican side winning. Remember, the Secretary of State will certify the election in 2024. So if he wins against the Democrat, that'll be a big deal. And he was also backed by Trump. So even though
I think we might have.
Are you there?
Oh, we got you now, David. Your signal's
all
back
right.
up.
Sounds good. It's like my brain. It goes off and on all the time. But look, the truth of the matter is in Missouri, Eric Greitens, a lot of GOP establishment money came in against Greitens, and he was defeated. He was kind of like the Kari Lake of Missouri, if you will, the Trump backed, not Trump-backed candidate, but he was the guy that said the election was rigged and stolen. So it's a cherry-picking situation. Arizona was good for Trump. Missouri wasn't so good for Trump. This is how it's playing around the country.
The signal's going out because of all the waves you're making over there, David. Back to Capitol Hill here. Holdout Democratic Senator Kirsten has seemingly agreed to the Democrats' economic, tax, and climate bill. Is it a done deal now this weekend?
Yes, it's a done deal. They need 50 votes, as we reported at the top of the show. And the only question is, will the parliamentarian rule this to be budget reconciliation? I know that's such geeky language, right? Oh, who cares about the parliamentarian? Well, in this case, we kind of do, because that means you only need 50 votes instead of 60 votes. So, yeah, it is a done deal. But you know you're in trouble with the Democrats, or I should say the Democrats know they're in trouble when you have to pass the Inflation Reduction Act. That would suggest that there is inflation, which we all know there is. And so there's still a lot of problems for the Democrats.
All right, David, what about this? Former Vice President Dick Cheney out with a new ad endorsing his daughter Liz in Wyoming's upcoming primary. And you know what? He's not mincing any words when it comes to President Trump, saying there has never been an individual who was a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. Polls show Liz Cheney losing next week. What say you?
Well, is it the year 2000? Should I check my calendar? With all due respect to the former vice president, does anybody care what the former vice president, Dick Cheney, has to say in 2022? I'm just saying, I think if you line 10 people up on the street, they're like, okay, right. Wait, Dick Cheney, wasn't he, what happened with him in hunting? And wasn't there an accident? And wasn't he for waterboarding? They don't give a rip what Dick Cheney has to say. That's my analysis. That was private, and now it's all public.
All right, David, thank you.
Thank you as always, David. Well, China is upping the ante against the U.S. as tensions intensify over Taiwan, halting cooperation with the U.S. on a range of issues and sanctioning House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her family in the face of the Speaker's visit to Taiwan this week. The latest salvos from China come as China is increasing military exercises off the Taiwan coast. Taiwan forced to cancel commercial airline flights over safety concerns as China fired missiles Thursday near Taiwan. China's show of military force leading to fears the communist power is preparing to invade the self-rule island. Now, for more on this, we'll bring in Bradley Bowman, Senior Director of FDD's Center on Military and Political Power. Bradley, thanks for coming on the show. First off, we'll start with these military exercises off the coast of Taiwan. Are these real-world tests to see if China can blockade the island?
You know, I think China is rehearsing what a blockade would look like, and this is a major escalation. Whether you look at the aircraft involved, the ships involved, the missiles employed, this is a big deal. Just a few for your viewers. More than 100 Chinese aircraft involved here, including fighters and bombers, more than 10 major vessels. Just today, 49 People's Liberation Army aircraft crossed, including fighters and bombers, crossed the median line in the Taiwan Strait. And they've focused their naval exercises on 6 areas all around the island of Taiwan, including in the east, which we can talk about later why that's significant. And 4 of these areas are immediately next to amphibious landing sites where you could see PLA forces coming ashore. And you mentioned the missiles, roughly 11 missiles launched. More than a few of those landed in Japan's exclusive economic zone, and 1 even flew over apparently Taiwan itself, a major provocation.
China cutting off dialogue with the U.S. on a range of issues now, from climate to the military, sanctions on Pelosi and her family. Did the Speaker's trip to Taiwan do more harm than good, or was it necessary for the U.S. to show off its support for Taiwan?
I think the Chinese Communist Party seeks to isolate and weaken the free people of Taiwan. And it's my view that America should do everything we can to counter that. So I, for one, am glad that Speaker Pelosi went, and I was glad that most all Republicans of the other parties supported it, because it's her right to go as the leader of the Article I branch of Congress in the House of Representatives. It sends an important signal that we stand with the free people of Taiwan defending their homes against authoritarian aggression. And they'll always try to blame us, but who was conducting the provocations here? Who was launching the missiles, and who was having meetings? I think the facts speak for themselves.
Oh, Brad, we'll shift gears to the Middle East here in the operation that killed al-Qaeda leader al-Zawahiri. The Senate Majority Leader acknowledging President Biden, quote, deserves credit, but that Zawahiri's presence in Kabul shows essentially that al-Qaeda is back in the region. Is Afghanistan once again a terrorist breeding ground in the wake of the U.S. withdrawal?
It never stopped being a breeding ground. Your viewers remember that was that Taliban welcomed al-Qaeda before the 9/11 terror attacks, gave them safe haven there, and they used that launching pad to kill so many of our fellow citizens. Al-Qaeda and the Taliban remained attached at the hip for 20 years. They never broke, despite their agreement with Trump where they said that they would. And now, once again, just like on September 10th, 2001, we have a Taliban-controlled Afghanistan that is a safe haven for al-Qaeda. So both things are true. Biden deserves credit for launching the strike, but Zawahiri's presence in Kabul, in the capital of Afghanistan, in a house that either is or right next to the leaders of the government, including Siraj Haqqani's relatives, who is the interior minister and helps lead the Haqqani network that has the blood of many Americans on his hand, demonstrates that Afghanistan is a safe haven for Afghanistan, and one strike in 11 months is not going to change that.
A lot's going on in the world, as always. Bradley Bowman, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, monkeypox in the U.S. comparing COVID lockdowns and shutting down churches to lax restrictions over monkeypox. Coming up. The U.S. is declaring monkeypox now a national emergency. The health emergency announcement coming more than a month after the first monkeypox case in the U.S. Today, cases nationwide are topping 7,000, and cases are doubling nearly every week. So now nearly 1.7 million Americans are eligible for the monkeypox vaccine. And according to the CDC, some 600,000 doses have gone out nationwide.
And for more on the health emergency, we have CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson with us. Lori, thanks for coming on Faith Nation. Great to see you. We'll start here. What do you think about the Biden administration declaring monkeypox a national emergency? The announcement comes after some criticism here over the administration's handling of the outbreak.
Yeah, that's right. The Biden administration was criticized for not doing enough, fast enough to contain the spread. You know, people have complained about long wait times to get a vaccine. So just 3 days ago, President Biden appointed a monkeypox response coordinator who will oversee vaccines, testing, and treatments.
Lori, right now, the CDC estimating nearly 1.7 gay and bisexual men face the highest risk of getting monkeypox. But could this spread into the broader population, do you think?
Well, the CDC wants very much for us all to avoid stigmatizing people infected with the disease. They want the media and others to emphasize that anyone can get it. But the truth is 97% of infected people are men who have sex with other men. That's according to a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Many doctors say monkeypox has all the characteristics of a sexually transmitted disease, but public health officials refuse to call it that. So while the vast majority of transmissions occur from sex, the CDC says technically it can be transmitted in other ways, such as being scratched by an animal that has been infected.
Now, Lori, critics are comparing the strict COVID church lockdowns we saw during the pandemic to lax monkeypox restrictions. What do you make of that?
Well, again, this gets back to avoiding stigmatizing infected people. So, for example, in San Francisco, the epicenter of America's monkeypox outbreak, city officials refused to cancel last weekend's Kink and Fetish Festival, which drew thousands of high-risk people to the city. And during COVID, we saw many large events canceled. The CDC refuses to advise men to have less sex or abstain from sex with other men, even though the World Health Organization did so. During COVID, the CDC advised Americans to alter their behavior, such as abstaining from church and certain Christmas gatherings. The CDC recognizes businesses such as bathhouses are at high risk for monkeypox transmission, but stopped short of recommending closure when they did recommend closing thousands of businesses during COVID. But it must be pointed out that monkeypox is rarely, if ever, fatal. It's been around a long time. We have great vaccines and treatments from monkeypox, and many people recover on their own. And of course, COVID is very different. It was brand new, much more severe, claiming the lives of millions of people. So even though the response has been different, the infections themselves are also quite different.
A great point, Lori. So New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is calling on the Biden administration to invoke the Defense Production Act to make more vaccines. Do you think, with all just said, that that's necessary?
Well, we've already seen that we have wonderful vaccines. They're actually the smallpox vaccines, so they've been around a long time. They're very effective, but we really don't have enough, especially during this monkeypox outbreak. It is a 2-dose regimen, and the vaccines have been rationed. Many people only get one vaccine, if they get one at all. A lot of vaccine locations are running out of the shots before they're given to all the people who are in line. So a lot of health professionals say, yeah, we need more vaccines, and it wouldn't hurt to have more treatments. Those are antiviral medications.
Well, Lori Johnson with great information as always. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, as the war in Ukraine rages on, we will show you the safe haven for refugees fleeing the country and how ORPHAN'S promise is ministering to the victims of the war.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell.
ORPHAN'S promise is ministering to victims of the war in cities throughout Ukraine,
including a haven where many refugees are finding shelter and comfort on their journey out of the country. George Thomas brings us that story.
Vitalina Zinotka says she'll never forget the day Russian soldiers first appeared on her street.
We saw them approaching from our basement through a crack in the window.
Zinotka, her husband, 2 sons and mother are from Ukraine's southern city of Kherson. On March 11th, 9 days after seizing control of Kherson, Russian troops started fanning out to outlying villages like Zinotka's.
They came into our house with their machine guns, and they didn't even bother to take their shoes off.
Zinotka told CBN News that the men were drunk and started intimidating her husband and 18-year-old son.
I felt like my heart was being squeezed. It felt like my soul was being squeezed. And it was even very hard to breathe because I was so fearful.
She slipped into an adjacent room where her mother and 13-year-old son were and whispered to them to pray.
I told my mom to pray that God would rescue us.
The Russians demanded to see their passports.
They were looking at our documents and trying to make sense of them, but they couldn't because they were drunk.
Zinotka says their desperate prayers were suddenly answered.
They were still walking around the house, pointing their guns at us, and praise God, they just left.
Zinotka and her husband escaped this past Saturday under heavy fire as Ukrainian forces attempted to retake Kherson. They headed west from Kherson to Ternopil, where CBN's ORPHAN'S Promise runs this training center for children, now converted to house fleeing refugees.
We are truly thankful for them hosting us. It's very comfortable. It's a very warm atmosphere. We were fed well. It's an amazing work that they are doing.
The staff at Ternopil Training Center began gathering supplies within hours of war erupting.
It started with us bringing our own mattresses from home. We had 6 to start with, and were ready to host 10 people. The next day, we received more mattresses, and we were ready to host another 35 refugees.
ORPHAN'S Promise bought this 2-story building in 2014 with the goal of reaching children and their families with the gospel. They would hold English classes Monday through Thursday and teach Bible lessons using CBN's Superbook on Friday. Some 230 children and young adults showed up every week.
We would teach them about God's law and the meaning of Christ's coming and resurrection.
War has the students now taking classes online. Staff members also hold regular online prayer meetings and counseling sessions when needed.
The fact that we can continue these lessons online brings peace to both us and them.
As refugees poured in, neighbors who lived around the ORPHAN'S Promise Center started pitching in. Some cooked, others brought supplies. Parents with children at the center also got involved.
We united in the cause of helping people, serving people, because they have needs.
The city of Ternopil here in the western part of Ukraine has been sort of a rest stop for those who are making their way out of the country. And according to the latest statistics from the center, they say that close to about 600 people have passed through their doors since the start of the war. The majority of those, like 17-year-old Anastasia, staying at the Orphan's Promise Center for a night or two. She fled from Sumy, northeast of Kyiv, where Ukrainian forces are launching fierce counterattacks against Russian forces.
I hope I will wake up from this nightmare soon and it will be all over.
Zenorka's family heads further west in the morning to stay with friends.
Staying here is an example of how Ukraine has become one family.
Yet there's no place she'd rather be than home.
I really want to go back, but I'm afraid. It would be very painful because everything is destroyed and I don't know if I can handle that right now.
George Thomas, CBN News, Ternopil, Ukraine.
Well, coming up, Vin Scully signs off, remembering the great sportscaster and the faith that inspired him. Next. Well, finally tonight, remembering the voice of the Dodgers, legendary MLB broadcaster Vin Scully passed away on Tuesday at the age of 94.
Known for his detailed commentary and masterful storytelling, Scully filled the airways for 67 seasons, covering iconic plays like Hank Aaron's 715th home run.
What a marvelous moment for baseball. What a marvelous moment for Atlanta and the state of Georgia. What a marvelous moment for the country and the world.
And those who listened to Scully knew he talked about much more than baseball. He was a man devoted to his Catholic faith. Scully frequently attended Sunday Mass at Dodger Stadium on game days and credits his faith for keeping things in perspective. When he left the booth in 2016 after more than 6 decades of broadcasting, he wanted to be remembered as a man who lived up to his own beliefs. What a great mantra.
For sports fans, just an iconic voice. And I hope whenever Vin gets to where he's going, he reminds everybody that it's time for Dodger baseball. I'll never be able to do him justice. He was one of the best.
A valiant effort.
I tried.
And he will be missed. That's going to do it for Faith Nation.